Welcome, everyone. I'm David Lindauer. I'm a professor in the economics department, and we thought we would get this panel started. It's entitled Making Learning New, Innovations in the Liberal Arts. I think, as many of you know, the first students to attend Wellesley College arrived on our campus in September of 1875. That's 140 years ago. And many of you probably also know that almost all of the nation's other elite liberal arts colleges are even older. Bowdoin, Middlebury, Williams, they opened their doors more than 200 years ago. What I find striking about the longevity of our best colleges is how unique this is among other institutions and organizations in our country. How many of our businesses are 100 or 200 years old? Not Amazon, Apple, or Google, but not GM or IBM either. Some of our newspapers are pretty old, none of our sports teams. Some departments of the federal government are even older, but nearly half are less than 50 years old. The longevity of Wellesley and of many of our best colleges suggests that these institutions have been and continue to provide an education that students and their families value, despite all the economic and social changes that have taken place over 2 centuries. We must be doing something right. For those who can question the relevance of a liberal arts education, and there are many who do these days, or who predict that technological change will make our form of residential higher education obsolete, I have a word of caution. Don't mess with history. We've been around for a long time and for a good reason. Now, if any of the alumni who are here today and the other guests attended class this morning, I suspect there was a lot that was familiar, even if you graduated 20, 30, or more years ago. Maybe the subject matter was familiar, or maybe the interaction between students and professors. If you look at assignments, whether books that are being read or equations that need to be solved, they too might look familiar. As with the conversations you overhear between students, they might have reminded you of a similar conversation you had when you were a student. But there's some new things going on in our classrooms. And I'm not speaking of the digital projectors, smart boards, and other high-tech gadgetry. A liberal arts education designed to last a lifetime is not static but evolving. We continue to discover new things to learn and new ways to learn them. So today's panel is going to tell you about 5 such initiatives in teaching and learning at Wellesley, some of which are only a few years old, others a bit longer. Permit me to introduce our panel, which is a dream team of Wellesley faculty. Catherine Waring, Associate Professor of Philosophy, is going to start us off and tell you about the first-year seminar program. Amy Banzaert, Lecturer in Engineering, will talk about WeLab. Paul Fisher, Associate Professor of American Studies, will discuss the Team Teaching Initiative. Marianne Moore, Frost Professor in Environmental Science and Professor of Biological Sciences, will introduce you to the Lake Baikal program. And I will finish up by telling you a bit about the Call to Word seminars in public writing. Catherine?
Okay, thank you. So as David says, I'm a professor in the philosophy department. I've been at Wellesley for just over 10 years now. I teach courses chiefly in the philosophy of mind and cognitive science, also logic and general philosophy of science. I also teach one of the core introductory courses in the philosophy department. And over the past several years, I've taught, in addition, a much more focused, topically focused introductory class, a first-year seminar on the nature and value of friendship. So that seminar and the program of which it's a part is what I want to tell you a little bit about. So let me start with a quick overview of the first-year seminar program. It began in the 2010-2011 academic year, so it's sort of 6 years old now, although there were a few prototype first-year seminars offered in the year before that, but the program sort of became an official thing, 2010-2011. Between 20 and 30 first-year seminars are offered every year, which means that somewhere between a quarter and a third of the first-year students take a first-year seminar. Courses are offered across the full range of academic departments and programs at the college. So to give you a few examples, there are first-year seminars in mathematics. There's one called Cryptography and Privacy, Sociology, Growing Up Unequal, Physics, Einstein and the Dark Universe, Theater Studies, From Memoir to the Stage, and Religion, Radical Individualism, and the Common Good. Those are just a handful of examples that, as you can see, come from all different corners of the curriculum. A number of the courses are explicitly interdisciplinary in their construction, and some of them are actually team-taught. So to give you an example of that, there's a first-year seminar called The Science and Culture of Blood, which is co-taught by a chemist and an anthropologist. So many of those courses, as you can see from their titles, are quite focused in their topics. But not all the first-year seminars are like that. Some of them take material from a standard introductory course in a particular field and present it in entirely novel ways. So an example here would be in the Biological Sciences department. There's a course called Exploration of Organismal Biology, which works through the standard material from the introductory organismal biology course, but by reading the scientific studies in which many of those results were established and using those scientific papers as the way into working through the material rather than a sort of textbook about this thick that costs $1 zillion and weighs 100 pounds. So different ways of sort of structuring the first-year seminars. So that gives you a sense of the sort of variety of courses that are on offer. To get clear about what all of these courses, in spite of their diversity, are aiming to do, what they have in common, I want to tell you a little more about my seminar. So I've said it's about the nature and value of friendship. What does that mean? So here are a couple of questions about friendship that we talk about in my class. Suppose that you are forced to choose between helping a friend and helping a stranger. How many of you think that it's okay for you to prefer to help your friend rather than the stranger? Right, a bunch of people. How many of you think that more strongly than that you should prefer to help your friend than the stranger? Okay, so maybe the odd person thinks that, but certainly, right, some people think, yeah, it seems like I should be allowed to, right, that it's intuitively plausible, that should be okay. But when we think about the demands of morality as they're articulated by many of our standard moral theories, right, theories about what we should do, the demands of morality tend to be impartial, so that showing a preference in who you aid doesn't fit tidily into those theories. So one of the questions we take up is, how do we reconcile what seem like the demands of friendship, or at least the inclinations that we have with respect to our friends, and also our family and other people that we care about, in conjunction with these apparently much more impartial moral theories? So that's one kind of question. Here's another. The Stoic philosopher Seneca, in a discussion of how we should respond when a close friend of ours dies, says that we should not mourn for our friend. It is better, he says, to replace your friend than to weep for him. How many people find this puzzling? Right? I mean, it is puzzling. Like, what could he possibly mean? But when you read Seneca, it's clear that he thinks that friendship is extremely important, right? That a good life is incomplete without friends. So it's not that he thinks, oh, you shouldn't mourn because, well, friends are nothing. So there's really a question, again, about what could he possibly mean, that it would be better to replace a friend than to mourn for him? And so this, involves partly thinking about the Stoic philosophical view that he has, but why somebody would hold such a view. So those are just two examples of the sorts of questions that we take up in my seminar, which sadly we cannot talk about anymore. If you want to know more about them, you're going to have to send a daughter here and have her take the seminar. So the way that the seminar works, we meet once a week around a seminar table, and we work through these and other questions using work from various philosophers, some of them historical. Plato, Aristotle have famously written about friendship, some more contemporary, to use the works of other people as entry points into thinking about what can be said for and against different positions on different questions. So like any philosophy course, this seminar gives the students an opportunity to learn how to do philosophy, right? How to critically discuss and evaluate, both orally and in their writing, the range of positions that somebody might take in response to a given question. I take those skills to be useful in a wide range of contexts beyond philosophy. But we might still want to know, well, what makes this course different from other philosophy courses, right? What makes it part of the first-year seminar program? So one thing that makes it different, it's small. It's capped at 15 students. So unlike many other introductory courses, it's a much more kind of intimate thing than it might be. Because it's small, it's highly participatory. It contains only first-year students, right? So every person in the room, except for the instructor, is someone who's at the very same point in their Wellesley career as everybody else, right? So a group of people who have a lot in common in a range of different kinds of ways, intellectually, socially, right? Lots of different things kind of come together, which make them a good group to spend some time together and help each other. The first-year seminars are typically, as we saw from some of the examples before, very focused introductions to specific fields of study, and many of those fields, like philosophy, are not fields that students will have encountered before they get to college. So this might be a way into a subject for a student who's thinking about majoring in it, but it might just be an opportunity to explore a field or a topic that the student is interested in simply because it interests them, which I take to be exactly the sort of intellectual exploration that we hope for students when they're in a liberal arts environment. And the last thing to say about the seminar, what makes it different, it gives students an opportunity right away when they arrive at Wellesley to work closely with a faculty member, right, which is another component of the liberal arts education. I take all of these goals to aim directly at what is the principal objective of the first-year seminar program, to help students make the transition from high school to college by integrating them early on into the rich intellectual life which Wellesley offers them. Students can, of course, find a lot of these benefits taking any number of other courses, but the first-year seminar program is set up to ensure that students find those benefits early, right? And that it's not a matter of luck that they end up being intellectually engaged with their peers and with the faculty. So that's what the program aims to do. Does it work? It seems to. Student interest is strong. The student evaluations of first-year seminars are very positive. So just to give you a sense of that, I'll leave you with some comments in the student's own words. So one student that took my course last academic year said, "My favorite part of this course is how it made me question what it means to be a friend, and to look more deeply into my preconceived ideas about friendship, morals, and even the world at large. I love this seminar style of the course because the constant discussion facilitated my own personal understanding as well as enabled me to talk out different ideas. I learned a lot from my classmates' different perspectives, as well as gained a deeper understanding of the readings from discussion. Finally, I think this course had the perfect class size. There were enough of us to get a variety of ideas and opinions, but few enough that everyone's voice could be heard and no one was lost or forgotten." A student commenting in a general survey about the seminar program that was conducted a few years ago said, "I actually know everyone's name in my class. This may not sound important, but it really makes me feel more comfortable speaking, which is essential to the structure of my class. I enjoy having a class with only first years. It's making the transition to college easier. I do more work in preparation for this class than my others, but I feel like the skills I'm learning can be applied to my other classes, which is great." So that's the first-year seminar program. Thank you.
On campus in terms of educational opportunities and advising. I'm a mechanical engineer. I studied at MIT for my bachelor's degree through my PhD. I was also MIT's first service learning coordinator and previously worked in the automotive industry as a design and manufacturing engineer. Some of you might be surprised to hear that Wellesley has engineering opportunities at all. We didn't when you were here, I can almost guarantee you. Traditionally, engineering has been considered too applied to belong in a liberal arts education. However, as technology has become more and more central, both to our everyday lives and also in considering our global crises, such as global warming, drone warfare, access to water, sustainable agriculture, the list goes on. We have recognized that a liberally trained student also requires basic literacy and competence in engineering methods and habits of mind. Exposure to these topics can help students both engage in technical concepts with more ease and provide a different analytical dimension for approaching work within their own discipline. Most of my students come to my classes with that perspective. They hope to engage in engineering topics to better understand and gain skills in the discipline, particularly given the framework of engineering that I teach, engineering as service to society. A small number of Wellesley students, perhaps 2 to 5 each year, also have interests in engineering as a career. We support these students with cross-registration and double degree opportunities at both MIT and Olin College, as well as advising. Many of our students don't opt for the double degree program, but instead pursue a hard science in undergrad and then pursue graduate school in engineering. I teach 3 semester-based introductory engineering classes at Wellesley. All of these classes have as few prerequisites as possible to ensure they are very accessible. My classes are all hands-on and project-based. They are intentionally small because they are so hands-on, generally 10 to 16 students per class. Students come from all majors at Wellesley, from English to psychology to physics. I have students in their first semester and students about to graduate. To give you a better sense of the courses, I'm going to tell you a bit about each one. Engineering 111, Project Creation for All, has been a first-year seminar at times, depending on the semester. And in it, I teach the product design and development process with an emphasis on creativity and human factors considerations. Students learn brainstorming, prototyping techniques, engage in reverse engineering, and learn how products are manufactured. Their semester-long project is focused on building assistive technologies for para-rowers at Community Rowing in Brighton. Engineering 120, Making a Difference Through Engineering, focuses on the role of technology in developing countries, exploring how engineers can improve livelihoods and living conditions, but only if they fully understand the context and culture in which they're working. Students work on real projects with real organizations based in Nicaragua and Cape Verde to apply and synthesize what they learn in class. There's an associated winter session trip, Engineering 125, in which I take students to Nicaragua to present the projects they worked on in the class and to explore firsthand the use of technology in the second poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. We hope to eventually offer a similar experience in Cape Verde, as well as summer internships in both countries. Engineering 160, Fundamentals of Engineering, introduces the big ideas of engineering, most appropriate for students who are preparing to cross-register at Olin or MIT. I introduce static, solid modeling, as well as the use of our laser cutter. Students learn feedback and control by programming Arduino microcontrollers. They engage in engineering modeling and simulation. And their culminating project varies each year, but is focused on some type of device that senses something in the environment and then responds. Last year, we collaborated with the Wellesley College Child Study Center and created devices that provide feedback to children there. For example, a circle time mat that lights up to encourage the students to stay on the mat during circle time. Or a device that walks children through the steps of washing their hands so the teacher does not have to remind every student to turn off the water when she or he is finished. To support this teaching, Wellesley has an engineering teaching laboratory in the Science Center, which has a number of resources to help students explore engineering in a hands-on way. We have a precision 3D printer, a powerful laser cutter, numerous benchtop and hand tools for working with wood, plastics, and aluminum. We have an electronics workbench for working with electronic components, as well as microcontrollers like Arduinos. We have computers loaded with state-of-the-art software engineering tools, such as SolidWorks and MATLAB. And a nearby machine shop, shown here, staffed by a phenomenal machinist. They're one of the very few who's excited to work with students rather than grumpy about it, who gives students greater access to tools, construction techniques, and machining capabilities. Beyond these classes, we offer advising, research opportunities. We have a student club and a speaker series, as well as the aforementioned cross-registration and double degree programs with MIT and Olin. The type of engineering opportunities offered at Wellesley are unique. Other liberal arts colleges that offer engineering generally provide coursework for engineering majors. They tend not to offer introductory classes with few prerequisites, like Wellesley does, so that as many students as possible here can explore engineering. While the effort is growing, it is also still rare to see engineering educators emphasize that the profession can be one that serves society, rather than as a purely utilitarian endeavor. Given Wellesley's mission, our students must be able to think critically about the technology that surrounds us, its potential for harm, as well as its potential to alleviate the global challenges we are facing in the coming decades. We need to figure out how to provide clean water and food for 10 billion people. We need to make renewable energy affordable and universal. We need to restore and improve the urban infrastructure. We need to prevent terror, whether from drone warfare or from nuclear attacks. All of these problems are not simply technical in nature, of course. They have political, economic, and cultural dimensions. Solving them requires multiple perspectives and leaders with sufficiently broad knowledge to take on these challenges effectively. Women who will make a difference in the world need a liberal arts education, enriched by engineering as well. And that's where the Wellesley Engineering Laboratory is focused.
Everybody, can you hear me? Everybody needs an engineer, and Amy's sitting next to me, which I really need. I'm a humanities person, so thank you, Amy. My name is Paul Fisher. I'm in American Studies, and I'm here to talk about team teaching at Wellesley, and especially a course that I team taught with my good friend and colleague, Elena Kreef from Women and Gender Studies, who wishes she could be here. She's here in spirit. This is our baby together, and it's called Rainbow Cowboys and Girls. We wanted to teach a course that was kind of complex about the West, both the history of the American West and of Westerns. And to give you a little sample of what we wanted to sort of work on, this is called the Longhorn Saloon in the town of Scenic, South Dakota. Really, the town is named Scenic, South Dakota. People swerve across the road to look at this because it's so showy and theatrical and obviously out of a Western. But what's behind it is really complex in terms of the history of cattle ranching and railroads and tourism and race relations. I don't know if you can see on this slide, but it says Indians allowed. It used to say no Indians allowed, and the whole relation of Indians and bars out west is very complicated. But even more ordinary, everyday parts of the West are pretty complex too. This is Shannon County, South Dakota, where Elena and I spent parts of 3 summers on a shoestring, and it looks kind of peaceful and ordinary, but let me tell you about Shannon County. It's got the lowest per capita income in the United States. 97% of the population lives below the poverty line. The unemployment rate moves between 85 and 95%. It has the highest infant mortality rate on the continent, 3 times the national average. And elderly people die in their homes during the harsh winters from poverty, from hypothermia. Why all of this in one place? The answer is it's an Indian reservation. This is the Pine Ridge Reservation, a very famous and well-known reservation. In May of 2015, it was renamed Oglala Lakota County, which is the name of the tribe that lives here. They consider themselves a nation, and many people can talk about, when we're out there, talk to us about sovereignty. This is a huge and complex issue. The question is, how can team teaching help with complicated issues about historical legacies, American myths, pernicious or not, and issues of social justice? Wellesley we do team teaching here all the time, but we had a special initiative about team teaching from 2012 to 2014. Its aims were to create interdisciplinary courses to serve liberal arts goals, to foster pedagogical innovation, to enhance student engagement, and to facilitate faculty development. The resources that were offered basically helped us have 2 professors in 1 classroom, which is hard for a lot of reasons and takes a lot of resources, as well as some modest grants for new course development. Over the 2 years, there were 19 courses funded to do this team teaching initiative, and I've given you just a few examples here to give you a flavor of what went on. Here are a few of them. Inequality, human rights in a global context, words, music, and voices, performing Spanish theater, the physics of music and musical acoustics, port cities of the Indian Ocean in historical perspective, learning by giving, nonprofit organizations, trauma, conflict, and narrative in Africa, experimental ethnology, and new perspectives on the global city. You can see that there's a huge amount of ambitious coursework going on here. It's not that Wellesley professors don't do this by themselves, but when you put 2 Wellesley professors together, you get something that's kind of much more dynamic, I think. It's a really interesting thing. Now, the course that we did, we had wanted to do this course, Elena and I, for years. And we figured out a way of making Westerns interesting to Wellesley students, many of whom probably never saw a classic Western. And so that's what Doris Day is doing up there. They don't know who Doris Day is either, but that's a different sort of question. But we really wanted to serve student constituencies as well as to get to some vital issues in an interdisciplinary course. We wanted to combine our expertise too. Elena is a 20th century visual and popular culture scholar, and I'm a 19th century historian and literary scholar, and we wanted to use our combined expertise to address some really kind of important 21st century issues. We started out with a fresh conception of Westerns and what Westerns are. We thought they were not just films and novels, but a whole range of different kinds of cultural texts that articulate mythologies of American culture. We saw Westerns as crucial to American gender and sexuality. Ours was a gender studies course, and it was a cultural history course that emphasized women's issues. You've got Dale Evans and Roy Rogers up there, but we also did A Little House on the Prairie, which was very popular and very big, and we ended the course with Brokeback Mountain. We also wanted to really talk about a multicultural historical West behind the often white myths of the West. We talked about Latinos, Asian Americans, African Americans, and Native Americans, and we were especially interested in this last category. Elena has done a lot of conferences on along these lines, and I grew up with Native Americans, Diné, Navajo, and Paiutes. So we were really interested in emphasizing this aspect of the course. Now, when we spent a lot of time in South Dakota, it wasn't all the sort of grim social conditions I was showing you before. One of the things that we really discovered that we wanted to convey in the classroom was the resilience and exuberance of Lakota culture. And that's us, and behind us is a res rod. If you want to know what a res rod is, I'm happy to explain it. I don't have time in my 8 minutes, but it's a complicated local phenomenon. One of the things that we did actually out there was meet with communities, leaders, and activists, and it's had many, many dimensions that we brought into the classroom. But one just sample feature was a thing called the Future Generations Ride that happens every December. It commemorates the Wounded Knee Massacre of 1890, as well as some of the activism in 1973, the AIM activism also at Wounded Knee. And these are actually photographs that local people sent us. I actually haven't been to this. Elena, I think, is going to do it this winter. I and horses do not get along. We also had some unhappy horse experiences, but that's a different story. But the emphasis on communities was very important for us, and we were doing some other kinds of research when we were there too, which we brought to the classroom. And we also, in bringing perspectives to the Wellesley classroom, we also brought Lakota community leader Vernell White-Thunder to Wellesley in November of 2012 to talk to students, and it was a very effective experience. This team teaching for us was a gateway into more stuff that we would like to do, some more Native American work in American studies and elsewhere in the college, pooling some other kinds of expertise. We're hoping to set up an exchange program, some kind of exchange program back and forth between Wellesley and the Pine Ridge Tribal College, Oglala Lakota College, and maybe have some internship experiences out there as well. And we're very committed to the kind of collaborative teaching that team teaching allows. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to shuffle around here. As I'm moving, I'm going to move you from the Wild West to the Wild East of Siberia. And I'd like to echo the synergy that comes with team teaching. I've had the same experience. I'm an aquatic ecologist here at Wellesley College. My home is in the biology department, and I've had the spectacular opportunity to co-develop and co-teach a course with Professor Tom Hodge in the Russian department. And this course made it to the Wellesley 100. Now, this is a list of 100 fantastic things or experiences that a student can have in her 4 years here. And it's number 18, although the number, I don't think the numbers impart any ranking. Now, this course, to my knowledge and to Professor Hodge's knowledge, is the first course at Wellesley to unite the humanities with the sciences. And the title is Lake Baikal, the Soul of Siberia. And yes, we go to Siberia. Now, This course was first offered in 2001. It's offered every other year, and we're taking our next group of students to Siberia this coming August. Now, the focus or goals of the course is to explore the scientific and cultural values of this region of the world. And you're probably wondering why? Why Siberia? Well, Siberia is extraordinarily rich scientifically and culturally. We go to a particular part called the Lake Baikal region, and this lake is the most biotically rich lake in the world. It contains more species than any other lake, and more than 80% of the animal species in that lake are unique or endemic to that lake. And you see some of them on this slide. This lake contains the world's only freshwater seal. And for this reason, UNESCO declared it a World Heritage Site in 1996. But the lake is also a touchstone of Russian culture. It's a very special place for Russians. In their mind, it encapsulates the beauty, the unspoiled beauty of the Russian motherland, pristine wilderness. So it represents for Russians something like what the Grand Canyon or Yellowstone National Park represents for Americans. Now, we also teach the course there because it is so culturally diverse. In addition to the Caucasian Russians who live around the lake, there are Evenks, those are the people at the top of the slide, and the Buryats. Now, these are indigenous peoples. They are ethnic Mongols whose groups have lived around this lake for thousands of years. And consequently, there are multiple religions here. For example, Christianity as represented by Russian Orthodoxy, to shamanism, to Buddhism. There are fascinating anthropological sites that ring this lake, and some of Russia's greatest writers have been inspired by this part of Russia. So the course format is this. We spend the spring semester here in a seminar course that prepares the students for their experience in Siberia in the month of August. Now, during the spring semester, the first half of that semester is focused on Siberian culture, beginning with Siberian history. And then the students start diving into the literature inspired by Siberia, such as Dostoevsky's House of the Dead, Solzhenitsyn's One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich, and some of the village prose writers of Siberia. The students also explore the religions of this region and some of the anthropological findings. And then we segue into the science half of the semester by first focusing on the history of Russian science, which is very different from that here in the West. Then we delve deeply into the principles of aquatic ecology, and we discuss some of the environmental issues that are challenging this part of the world. Now, in August, we pack our suitcases and we fly over to Lake Baikal. And if you look at that map on, what would it be, the lower left, you can see the lake is in southern Siberia, just north of Mongolia. So we fly into the city of Irkutsk, which you see right here, a city of 600,000 people. And then the next morning, we take a ship out to this tiny village called Bolshia Koti. Now, this is a village of 200 people, and the only way of reaching it is via ship. So our gear, and all of our food come out via the ship. Now, to give you some perspective, here's Professor Hodge, my co-instructor. And we live right over here in these trees. More specifically, we live at this biological station at Irkutsk State University. Now, here we do science in the day, but sometimes at night, depending on the activity pattern of the organisms we're working with. The students craft original hypotheses. They collect data to test those hypotheses. They analyze it, and then they write it up in scientific format. And some of these projects have been published in Russian scientific journals. But we also pursue many cultural activities, and some of these arise spontaneously. And here you see the students down in the hold of the research ship. They are practicing a folk song, a Russian folk song. They have rewritten the lyrics to honor the birthday of a Russian scientist who's on board the ship. Now, this course, like a liberal arts education, is a life-changing experience. Many of our students have received fellowships, from Watson fellowships to Fulbrights to a Gates fellowship to NSF graduate research fellowships, allowing them to return to Russia or to Central Asia for additional research or teaching opportunities. But we find that this course opens the doors for almost all students after graduation. Many of our students list it on their resumes, and they have told us that the admission boards of law schools, medical schools, and employers notice this. And I think what's going through the mind of those admission boards and employers is, this person willingly exiled themselves to Siberia for 1 month in the summer. But more seriously, I think it signals to them that this person is adventuresome. This person is a risk taker. Now, Russian science students participate in this course when we are there in Siberia, and some of them have come to Wellesley College to participate in our summer research program, thereby internationalizing that program. With the monies that Wellesley College pays Irkutsk State University to use their biostation, Irkutsk State University has renovated and rebuilt its biostation. And that is now allowing them to host student groups from Germany, France, Switzerland, and developing nations, thanks to the funding from Germany. And I should add that the course that Irkutsk State University is offering these students is based after the Wellesley College Lake Baikal course. And this course, the Wellesley College Lake Baikal course, spawned a multi-million-dollar research grant from the U.S. National Science Foundation. That grant was given to Wellesley College, 4 other American universities, and Irkutsk State University. And it's funding more than 20 scientists, including undergraduates, graduate students, and postdocs, who are exploring how biodiversity in this lake will respond to climate change. And finally, Professor Hodge, myself, and several students are working with movie producers in New York City who are planning an IMAX movie about this lake and freshwater conservation. Thank you for the opportunity to share some of our adventures on the opposite side of the world.
I'm going to round out or wrap up our discussion by telling you about a program that I'm involved in. It's called the Calderwood Seminars in Public Writing. I direct that program, and I also teach one of the seminars. By the end of this year, and this is our 3rd year, we will have introduced 16 new courses to the college curriculum. They've been taught a total of 28 times in the first 3 years, involving about 250 students. And they span the disciplines. They include Martina Conacher's Biology in the News, Martin Brody's Music in Public, and Eric Mathis's Ethics for Everyone. Calderwood seminars are much more than writing-intensive 300-level electives. While these seminars focus on public writing as distinct from academic or specialist writing, they're also designed to empower students in the knowledge they've gained in their majors from all the courses they've taken previously, and to help students identify their voices in their disciplines. And I thought the best way to explain these seminars and how they're different from other courses at the college is to take you through a typical week in the seminar that I teach and that I last taught in spring. The seminar is called Economic Journalism. 12 students were enrolled. 12 is the enrollment cap we have on all of our seminars. And I divided my class into 2 groups, Group A and B. There were 6 students in each group. And week 5, and I'm going to focus on the 5th week of the seminar, was devoted to the 2014 presidential address to the American Economics Association, which is the professional association of economists. And that address was delivered by Claudia Golden. Claudia Golden is a distinguished economic historian and labor economist. She's the Henry Lee Professor of Economics at Harvard University. Professor Golden's address, a Grand Gender Convergence, examines the gender pay gap between men and women in professional occupations in the areas of finance, IT, law, and medicine. And week 5 of the seminar was Group B's turn to be writers. And each of the 6 students in Group B were paired with a student from Group A who was her editor for that week. And these pairings would change every week, so each student got to work with half of the students in the class over the course of the semester. And let me describe for you the drill of the 5th week. And this is what we did in my seminar and in most other seminars. And I'm going to talk about it in the context of one student who happens to be sitting in the room. So Narayani Gupta, raise your hand, Narayani. Narayani was a writer for week 5, and you can talk to her later and get her memories of week 5. She, as well as every member of class, the first thing they had to do was to read Professor Golden's address, which is published in the American Economic Review. And this address was written for an audience of PhD economists, not for undergraduate economics majors. It is a subtle analysis on a compelling social issue. So the first thing Narayani had to do after she read the address was she had to draft an 800-word, jargon-free news story that might appear in the New York Times covering that address. She had to figure out what the article said, how it made its case, and place it in some sort of context. After all, why should any non-economist have any interest in what was said at an American Economics Association meeting? I assure you that nothing sharpens the mind as much as having to write 800 words on a complex subject that your mom and dad can understand. Narayani then had to get her story to Kathy, another member of class, who was her editor that week, in time for Kathy to comment on both the substance of Narayani's argument and to recommend ways to improve the writing. Armed with these comments, Narayani then had to redraft her piece, and post it to the seminar's Google group by our press deadline, which was usually Wednesday mornings at 9 a.m., a bit more than 24 hours before the class met. By 9 a.m. on Wednesday, and virtually no one ever missed the deadline. And that was because they weren't afraid of me, they were afraid of their classmates. By 9 a.m. on Wednesday, every student had either worked as an editor or as a writer on this assignment, and we now had 6 800-word essays posted to our Google group. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the renowned Japanese film director Akira Kurosawa and his legendary film Rashomon, this is what was happening to our seminar, Rashomon. 12 students reading the same work and coming to different conclusions about what they saw and why it mattered. Before class, every student had to read all 6 pieces written by her classmates, and of course they were already familiar with one as either a writer or an editor, and come to class prepared to discuss the work of that week's writers. We would then spend the first half of class discussing the article for that day, in this instance, Claudia Golden's work. We reviewed how economists go about analyzing pay discrimination, and we went over the fine points of Professor Golden's empirical work. And this offered the class a review of econometric lessons they had learned in other courses. From a faculty member's perspective, nothing is better than discussing material that students already have invested heavily in. They come to class not as blank slates, but as well-informed participants, fully engaged in the topic at hand. The second half of class was devoted to workshopping the 6 pieces that had been written that week. We spent about 10 minutes per piece, literally going around the room with each student pulling out her marked up copy of her classmates' essays and asking questions and offering suggestions. It's hard at first to students to give and receive criticism of their classmates, but they got much better and much less inhibited as the semester progressed. By the end of our 2.5-hour seminar, Narayani had a lot to think about. She had read the work of her 5 other classmates who faced the same assignment as she did. She had listened to our general discussion of Golden's address. She received the specific and often quite pointed comments of her peers, and she had my written comments on her work. 1 week after taking stock of all this material, Narayani would submit a second and final draft of her news story. In this way, every student in class was writing every week, working on either a first or a final draft, and nothing improves a student's writing more than writing every week. In week 6, at the same time as Narayani was rewriting her story on the gender pay gap, she was also serving as Stella's editor when Group A students were now assigned a 1,200-word book review of Yale economist William Nordhaus's book, The Climate Casino, on the economics of climate change. So every week in economic journalism, as it is in other Calderwood seminars, is a new beginning. We start from scratch on new topics that span the discipline, from gender pay gaps to climate change, from the federal deficit to income inequality. Senior majors get to take one more lap around their majors before they graduate, reviewing material they learned in previous courses, empowering their knowledge in their major, and helping them to find their voices as fledgling economists. The format I described more or less characterizes the approaches taken in all the Calderwood seminars. We tend to use similar assignments, book reviews and coverage of journal articles and of public lectures, the writing of op-eds, and conducting interviews of professionals in the field. And in some cases, students get to publish their work, Narayani did, often in Huffington Post. Students have been overwhelmingly positive about their experience in Calderwood seminars. They appreciate the opportunity to see the work of their peers, something that happens very rarely in college. They appreciate developing the soft skills of learning to both give and receive criticism, and they talk about the unique bond formed with the students in their seminars. They tell us how these seminars improve their command over their disciplines and how it improves their writing, improvements that spill over to other courses and their work experience after graduating. I'm going to conclude, as Catherine did, by reading you a few quotes from students who've taken Calderwood seminars. I'll start with a student in Barry Lydgate's You Say You Want to Change the World. She wrote, "Challenging, engaging, frustrating, rewarding. That's how I would describe to you my Calderwood experience this past semester. For the first time, I was taking a class where the whole focus was on my ideas, my writing. I did all of the research. I had complete creative control over the writing process and complete freedom from the format of academic writing, although I'll admit it took me many drafts to shed its chains." A student from Tracy Gleason's Psychology in the Public Interest sent her the following email. "I just ended my internship with the Office of Public Affairs at the Labor Department and wanted to let you know how beneficial last semester's Calderwood was for my work. From drafting the ideal 75-character tweet, editing press releases, to writing blogs on behalf of the department, the workshopping skills from the class have proved extremely useful. My boss was often impressed by both my writing and editing skills and was always curious as to where I picked them up. This further proves that your seminar is still the most beneficial class I have taken at Wellesley." And lastly, for my Calderwood seminar, Economic Journalism, a graduate from 2014 wrote, "The skills I learned in econ journalism are serving me very well at CEA. CEA is the Council of Economic Advisors, and this student is working there at the moment. I write pages and pages every day, and most of my writing is aimed at a general audience. I often get calls asking me for writing help. This morning I was asked to translate from econ robot to human, a skill I am now apparently known for." Thank you. So I want to thank my co-panelists. We pretty much finished on time and kept our time limits. We'd be happy to take questions. I thought if you have some, we'll collect a few and people will respond accordingly. Please.
In terms of students 4 years at Wellesley, how much time would be spent in more traditional classes versus the innovative classes that you would be teaching?
Okay. Take a couple more in the back. Question?
What classes or courses do students have available to them who are interested in pursuing careers in more specialized fields like finance or business general beyond the Wellesley Fidelity Portfolio Initiative?
Anyone else?
Yeah, I suspect for many of us here, the value of what you are doing is self-evident. What I get concerned about out in the world is how we encourage everybody else to think that way, right? I mean, I hear lots and lots of things now about not only moving away from a liberal arts education, but moving away from education at all, which I find pretty stunning. You know, in my own world, I am fully inclined toward liberal arts majors or liberal arts, folks who've been educated in a liberal arts setting, but that's not very common. So I'm really curious about what we all can do to begin to promote some of those ideas out in the general public.
Anyone want to take a crack at any piece of that?
I'm sure we all have opinions about the last one.
Go ahead, Catherine.
Yeah, that's one of those frustrating things because you sort of think, well, but it's valuable in itself. What do you mean I have to defend it? I guess I come back to, I mean, there are studies as well as anecdotal evidence that people who major in courses like philosophy end up doing extremely well. And, you know, just to take the anecdotal, the kinds, I mean, it goes back to what I was saying before, the kinds of things that we do, you need to do all the time, thinking about a position that someone is making a case for. Have they made a good case for that position? Is there a more plausible case to be made for some opposing position? Can you articulate your concerns with that position? That's all I do, you know, and it might be that I do it with respect to questions that lots of people would think are very abstract or very esoteric, but the skill is incredibly transferable. And it seems to me that lots and lots of our courses have those kinds of skills at their heart, so that one kind of case you can make is to focus on the sort of skills as opposed to the content, if you like, and make a case for the importance of those. So that's one kind of thing, it seems to me, that we can do to defend ourselves.
I think from my experience, involving people who normally would not experience a liberal arts education in that education for a short period of time can be an eye-opener. It certainly has been for my Russian colleagues, and they are now imitating our Lake Baikal course. You know, so I think that can be powerful. And I'm thinking of Paul's situation. You know, bringing some of the people from your part of the world, you know, here, or exposing them to the liberal arts approach there.
I think a lot of us are very interested in sort of real-world exchanges of various kinds. We try to make our courses more relevant to the real world, and the real world more so-called more relevant to Wellesley. And I think that a lot of us are interested in taking classrooms all kinds of places, both metaphorically and literally. It's hard to do. It's sometimes hard to convince people, but it's worth doing.
Yeah, and actually with technology today, I mean, it's becoming more and more. It's more easy to do this, you know, via Skyping and things like that. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I mean, I was just asked to speak at a large Russian scientific conference and did so via Skype. You know, there was a 13-hour time difference, but you know, and I was up at 2 a.m. But you know.
I think I want to take I don't want to miss any of the questions, so I'll go in order, and then Amy, if you want to chime in at any point, please do. How much time do students spend in the courses that we've described? I've always found course selection by students to be one of the great mysteries of undergraduate education. I know Rainey could probably speak to this better than I can, is that by coincidence she wound up in my first semester, Econ 101, and then had, I hope you'll agree with this, the good sense to come and talk to me before she signed up for courses the next semester and the semester after that. And Naraini got a fabulous Wellesley education because she made great choices for 8 semesters. Some students look at the classroom schedule and go, I don't want to take a class at 8:30. I don't want to take a class Friday afternoon. And you kind of wonder sometimes, did they get the education that they could have gotten here? So I don't have an answer. It has to do with individual students, how they make those decisions. These opportunities are there, but I couldn't tell you, what the secret is to why some students have these spectacular experiences they would have in any of the courses you've heard described, and other students kind of miss out on them. As for pursuing finance and business, my department, we offer a 300-level elective in finance theory, and we have for a long time. We give students the opportunity to cross-register and to take courses at Sloan, which count for their degrees. I think we generally feel that Wellesley has an incredibly successful and ongoing track record of students doing well in the financial services industry, and their liberal arts college background serves them extremely well. We're not about to open a business school, unless kind of like to endow one, but then there'd probably be a big fight over it with some other faculty. I think we create an opportunity for students to pursue some of these things at MIT, for example, at Sloan, but that's not where our strengths are, and I don't think that it's really limited our students in pursuing careers in finance after college. I'd also like to comment on the value of the liberal arts. I sort of started off kind of making a pitch in that direction. And I'm going to give you an answer I know you're not going to like. I don't think there's a problem, and let me explain why. I'm an economist. I look at market outcomes. There are two market outcomes I'm going to highlight. Wellesley has not been having a hard time attracting students and not having a hard time attracting very good students. So from the input side, while there are a lot of people talking about, oh, it's a waste to go to a liberal arts college and you should have a professional experience early on and this won't be market worthy, well, it doesn't seem to be affecting admissions or the number of students applying. On the outcome side, there are really very few Wellesley graduates who are voluntarily unemployed 6 months after they graduate. That, to me, suggests that the marketplace continues to value a liberal arts education, even as many people are wondering if it has a future. Amy, you want to add anything?
I think you.
Okay. Let's grab another round of questions, please.
I'm interested in hearing about all these innovations in curriculum that help prepare students for the real world. We didn't have those when I was here. I graduated in 1981. But one thing we did have was a very civil and robust discourse in the classroom. And just another example was found in today's Wall Street Journal where Williams initiated an uncomfortable learning speaker series for students to learn how to deal with thoughts that might, or opinions of other people that might make them uncomfortable in the classroom. And lo and behold, they had to cancel it because it made people uncomfortable. You may be familiar with a study that Yale commissioned of about 800 college students. Again, this was in the journal. 51% of them thought there should be speech codes regulating speech on campus. 63% of them thought that there should be trigger warnings. A third of them couldn't identify the First Amendment as the source of a guarantor of free speech here. That's all very not real world, because when you leave college, you will hear things that make you uncomfortable, and you need to be able to listen to people, to take in what they say, to negotiate, to deal with them. What's going on? Could you speak to what's going on with Wellesley now with that kind of, I think, alarming national trend?
I like that question. I'm a high school principal, and I was interested in your team teaching initiative to create innovative pedagogy to enhance student engagement. And I kind of want to get underneath that from the teachers. I'm a fellow teacher. What was under that initiative? Did you see a need for at Wellesley? We need to figure out different ways to enhance kids differently. Curious.
Third question? We'll go with these two, please.
Since you've talked about, you're doing fabulous things, and I speak as somebody who's been in higher ed for a long time, but how do you get the kid who won't take a class at 8:30? How do you guarantee that every student who comes to Wellesley, when it's all elective, when these are a self-selecting group and you get the go-getters, how do you reach the shy kid or the kid who's got issues that they're afraid that they can't do your work, like in engineering, and they're the ones you want? So my question is, what mechanisms are in place to make sure that every Wellesley student gets exposed to this? That it's not just self-selecting.
Well, we got a hard set in front of us. So we have speech, team teaching, and the shy kid. Who wants to go first?
I can start with the shy student. So 2 of the 3 courses I teach are mandatory credit non, so that there's that helps lower the barriers. And every year I question, should I keep it? And I ask my students, and they say, absolutely, I would not be here if this were a graded course, because I'm terrified of engineering, but I'm curious about it. I want to engage in it. So that's one way. I think, as all of my colleagues, try to be as accessible as possible. So when a high school student emails me a question, curious about Wellesley Engineering Program, I email her right back. And I often get, I can't believe you responded. I've never had a faculty member respond before. And at my door, I have an open door policy. We all try to do that as much as possible so that we are letting students come to us in the ways they want to, and then we're also trying to publicize the opportunities in ways that are very friendly. So we're not trying to publicize them in ways that, at MIT there was a lot of shock you with technology and wow you, and I try to show where the engaging, interesting, gentler means, as well as the really cool, shocking stuff. But we get that in more subtle ways to try to make it more accessible. And then also, when classes go well, students tell each other. So the first semester I taught, I had smaller enrollment, and I had students saying, "Oh, I don't know," and then they said at the end, "Oh, this was amazing! I'm telling all my friends." And now, every time I have a new student, I can always find out who did she speak to come to my class. And the ability for students to communicate on this campus is phenomenal. Maybe not in civil discourse, though. I'd say it's pretty decent there as well. But they share alike.
It's not, again, you're relying on students. There's no way for us to get there.
Well, maybe we could add, these aren't the only, as it were, mechanisms that are in place. I take it that not each person is going to be reached by some single, so, another piece that Amy didn't mention is a whole advising structure, right? So every first-year student is assigned an advisor who she meets with before registering for her fall semester classes of that year, and then who is sort of, around very officially through the whole first year and then into the first half of her sophomore year, because they don't declare a major and therefore get taken over by a department or a program until they've committed themselves to that. So there's that kind of gap after the first year. And that's, a formal systematic program where each student does have conversations with someone on the faculty. And usually these matchings are done on the basis of some information that the student has given before arriving about potential subject she's interested in, and other things that kind of give you clues about who might be someone good to work with her. So there's that kind of formal structure, and then in the orientation when students first arrive, there's all kinds of stuff there as well. So that's kind of another way that we try to get students to think about what would constitute sensible choices or well-rounded choices, those kinds of things. That's another component.
Can you just expand that to, are there any requirements to graduate, and are there any requirements for the major? I just think that adds to that conversation, those topics. If they exist or don't, I'm not even sure anymore.
We're not Brown. We have requirements.
We have lots of requirements.
Sometimes we think too many requirements,
Yeah.
but that's another debate.
Yeah. Can we start on some team teaching? We have a whole panel full of team teachers. I'm not the only team teacher here, and if anyone wants to add anything to what I have to say, in my little presentation, didn't have a chance to talk about all the wonderful things and terrifying things that happen in team teaching. It is so much work. It's twice as much work, and partly because you're checking everything with your team teacher as you do it. You don't sort of control the classroom the same way, but it's incredible teacher training. Before I did this, I had been at Wellesley since the earth cooled, originally teaching dinosaurs, and I've been around the block a few times, but I felt I learned from somebody who was a good friend of mine incredible numbers of sort of approaches and tricks and interesting ways of teaching, and saw how they worked, because when you're teaching you don't always get to see how they work or not, and the conversations that we had were enormously helpful just for teaching. For the students, I think it was great for them to see. We did our course mostly by discussion. There's a big surprise at Wellesley College, and we had a lot of discussions about very complicated issues where both of us would talk to each other as well as to students. And this goes to the civil discourse question too. For them to see us talking about some very thorny and difficult issues to each other, I think was pretty good training for students as well.
tackle the speech question?
I can start.
Please.
Trigger warnings, yes. My sense is that we do not instantiate the national trend. We are lagging behind the kinds of things that you read about, for which I'm grateful. Long may that last. I guess a few things to say. I think, I think we just constitute a community that is quite civil and that does value engagement very highly. And so, there's sort of an entrenched practice of just having to work things out in a civil and engaged kind of way. And so I think that's to our advantage. But it's also worth maybe mentioning that President Bottomley, over the past couple of years, in things like her convocation address at the beginning of the year, one of the themes that she's really emphasized to the community as one that it's valuable for us to be mindful of in the current context that we live in is precisely one of civil engagement and sort of the importance of engaging across differences and not putting up walls and shutting down. So, it's partly in that more kind of, I don't know what to call it, official or public context that we have the college, coming out and endorsing exactly the kinds of values that you were mentioning as being essential, not just here, but later elsewhere. So.
I think I just want to make a brief comment on the shy child issue. We probably could be doing better, but I don't know how. And I'm a grandfather, so I've been through I have 3 daughters, all went to college, and been through this process myself personally and also professionally. And I'm amazed, as I suspect many people in this room are, that we let 17 and 18-year-olds decide where to go to college on their own, the second largest financial decision of our lives after buying a home. And then when they get here, we let them make decisions about how to spend their time here in the delusion that they are adults and can make wise decisions. I don't know how to lean against that. And I can just repeat what I said, is I sometimes look at transcripts of seniors who happen to cross my threshold and I haven't met before, and I talk to them about how they spent their years here, and I think to myself, that's too bad. You could have gotten more out of the experience. I don't say that, but I don't. As long as we continue to believe that we're going to entrust these decisions to our 18 and 19-year-olds, it's hard to know beyond what Amy and Catherine said. We all reach out to students as we can, but not one of us can reach out to an entire entering class of 550 students. We're almost at the time we're supposed to end. Is there any other question, please?
I'm a senior from Wellesley College, and I think I can answer that question from the student perspective. As an international student, it's hard at first to speak up in class, but I found the professors here very helpful and nice. So at first you have a faculty advisor, as the Professor Lindauer mentioned, but I found that besides that faculty advisor, you also have a lot of professors that you can talk to. It's not like if they're not your faculty advisors, they're not going to talk to you. You can always walk into their office, and then even if it's not an office hour, they're going to talk to you. I remember Professor Lindauer talking to me for an hour right before the exam when I was taking the 101, because I was so intimidated. I realized I don't understand the material, but it's right before the exam. Usually you expect professors not going to talk to you right before the exam. Professor Lindauer spent an entire hour talking to me, not only about the materials, but also about my choices for college, because I was struggled to choose a major. And I think 16 and 17-year-olds are maybe more mature than adults think.
Maybe.
After you go to college that you don't know what they're going to do. Wellesley, trust Wellesley, we are in good hands. And how to seek for help.
I think on that note, sure.
A friend gave me a definition of a really good college is one where you can't graduate graduate without getting a good education. I think that's what Wellesley is, even if you were avoiding it.
Thank you all.
Thank you.